Hello, and welcome to Vault 33, a podcast for Amazon Prime's Fallout. We are your hosts, Andrew Sorsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Andrew.
We just watched the third episode of the second season of Fallout entitled The Profligate. We assume you have as well. Total spoilers ahead. Let's dive into the after talk. Before we do, I'm going to give you a couple places where you can contact us. You can follow us at Twitter or X at Fallout Vault 33. Add us on iTunes, Spotify, other streaming services. Like us, please leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. Our feed is on Buzzsprout, and if you go on Buzzsprout, you can actually text us. You can actually text us a message. But the best thing you can do really is spread the word, tell your friends, and really that'll get the word out. This episode was written by Chaz Hawkins and directed by Liz Friedlander, who has previously directed episodes of Shining Vale, Bad Monkey, and The Rookie. I don't know too much about Liz Friedlander other than that. Dwayne, why don't you give us a recap of this episode?
Sure thing. All right. Big episode, and here we go. Thaddeus, who's Maximus's old squire, is living the Ghoul life. He's running a child labor sweatshop. He's extremely happy to be out of the Brotherhood of Steel, where he found the physical requirements and other requirements to be onerous. Meanwhile, Lucy and the woman she saved are marched back at gunpoint to a settlement by soldiers in post-apocalyptic Roman centurion uniforms. They are the Legion. Their camp is full of guns and cannons reminiscent of the 20th century warfare, but at the same time, humans are being punished by these Mad Max Roman soldiers left and right, and in the most medieval ways. Teeth pulled, flogged while tied to the stocks. It's a scene of mayhem and despair. Lucy and the women are marched into the tent of a man wearing a mask reminiscent of Helios, a Roman avatar of the sun, played by Macaulay Culkin of Home Alone fame. He's Lacerda Legate, and after he summarily executes the woman Lucy saved via beheading, he marches Lucy to Kaiser, their leader. They briefly discuss the Legion's current civil war of succession after the death of their original leader, as well as having their Kaiser take her virginity as a matter of course. When Lucy doesn't consent and makes them aware that she's not a virgin in the first place, but that she could help them with their schism problem, they decide to crucify her, with Lacerda telling her that her goodness doesn't matter, only their strength. Meanwhile, in the ruins of the hospital where Lucy left the Ghoul meets up with his dog and struggles to remove the giant scorpion venom from his injured leg, while musing about his ancient body and how it relates to the ship of Theseus paradox. In a flashback, Cooper happens upon his wife Barb in the kitchen, desperately trying to stuff their daughter Janie's plush toys into the keepsake box that has been allocated to them by Vault Tech for their imminent bunker lifestyle. She's crying and lacks some of the glamour that we're accustomed to seeing her draped in. Cooper offers that they might not have to leave lots of stuff behind and go live in a vault. She doesn't have the energy to argue, and he bids her farewell as he goes to an event for his friend Charlie. At the event, an American Veteran Entertainment Alliance fundraiser, Cooper learns that billionaire Robert House is building a weapons system in Las Vegas that Cooper's wife Barb was discussing during the meeting that he eavesdropped on. Cooper reminds Charlie that he doesn't want to kill House, and Charlie reminds Cooper that people kill people, and that in the case of House, killing him is the right thing to do. We meet Diane Welch, a congresswoman of Andy's own hometown of Glendale, California, who dresses like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and comes across as an uncharismatic bore. We also learn that she's the only congressperson to not take corporate funding. She's quickly forgotten as Cooper runs into House in the bathroom. House mentions that Charlie, his friend, is a communist, and Cooper denies any knowledge of that. House then asks Cooper if he's a commie, and Cooper tries to ignore House, but House continues to engage. Later, Cooper's friend Charlie is speaking at the podium at the event, and he relates a story about how he had saved an injured Cooper Howard during an engagement, and when he checked on Coop, he was surprised to hear him ask about the other men in their unit that were also fighting. Charlie reminds Cooper that while they gave him an award for saving Cooper, that took killing 3 other men, a reference to his task with House. In the now, the Ghoul tracks Lucy to the Legion's camps, where he also notices that the Legion is undergoing a civil war. Realizing that he cannot take on 2 armies at once, the Ghoul seeks help. He encounters a robotic version of Victor the Securitron, who tells him that there are rangers in the hills. He goes to the hills and he finds remnants of a new California Republic force that believes they're winning against the Legion. The Ghoul claims that they've already lost. The Ghoul then goes on to the Legion, camp that's holding Lucy and offers them information on the last holdout of the New California Republic that's in the hills in exchange for Lucy. The Legion faction holding Lucy captive obliges and gives her back to the Ghoul. While preparing to go wipe out the remnants of the New California Republic, the Ghoul rigs the Legion's dynamite to go off, sparking an immense explosion and then a skirmish between the faction that had held Lucy and the rival faction that's fighting them in the Succession War. Over in Area 51, the elders squabble about how to proceed. Chain of command, Yosemite, versus the ability to help so many, Quintus. Quintus reminds the other elders that the Brotherhood began as an act of rebellion by Captain Roger Maxson when he saw a lab in California performing depraved experiments on human subjects. Quintus frames the rebellion on the question of who the elders serve, their people and God or the Commonwealth government. When the Yosemite elder leaves the meeting unmoved, Maximus asks why they don't just kill the Commonwealth representative. After all, Quintus just said that if the cause is righteous, they'll prevail. Quintus disparages Maximus in front of everyone and dismisses him. Xander then finds Maximus and turns him against Quintus by telling him that the clerics have too much control and are about to make a mistake, that the Brotherhood is supposed to be a bulwark against chaos, and that a war of rebellion is nothing but chaos. Xander manipulates Maximus into joining him on a policing adventure to destroy Securitron robots. When they get past the robots, they find Thaddeus's child labor force. Xander attempts to separate the Ghoul children from the regular children, since the Ghouls are abominations and he wants to exterminate them. Thaddeus comes out from hiding and tries to reason with Xander, giving Maximus crucial time to realize he's not about killing kids, whether they're Ghouls or not. Before Xander can massacre everyone, Maximus crushes his skull with Xander's own warhammer. And that's it.
Oh, thanks for giving us that.
Yeah.
I thought this episode overall was great. I thought I loved the expansion of the world building. I always love, it's my favorite thing about this show, is having the world building that you see just expanded upon, getting more lore. And it's interesting this episode getting specifically lore about the founder of the Brotherhood, Roger Maxson, which I'm guessing that at some point we'll probably get a complete backstory section of that would be nice. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode, and seeing, of course, the Legion was another expansion of that lore. And it's great because, you know, this property, like I said, I'm not that familiar with the property as a video game other than what I've played, which was a lot of Fallout 4 and some of Fallout New Vegas. But there's so much wealth of world building inherent in the games that they don't need to follow a specific like plot. They can just take that world building as its own thing and build any story on top of that world building as they want, and I think it's going very well for them.
They're doing a good job, just to piggyback on what you said, of taking the information from the games, like the various factions, characters, etc., and sliding them into the show. It feels pretty seamless. They don't always have to go into stuff. People who are familiar will recognize the Legion for what they are, but by giving them a bit more plot, it kind of makes it sticky. I feel like it should have been called Houses Divided or something, just because it's about, like, you've got the New California Republic divided from what they believe is their other force. You've got the what's it called, the Brotherhood divided over the fusion filament, and then you've also got what we just meet, the Legion divided over a succession war. So I just feel like there's something. Oh. There was clearly that theme was around here. So the
lots
title
of civil
that they gave
war in this episode.
Yeah, the title they gave it it felt like a good title for last week's episode, really. I think also they did something very clever here. Maybe it's technical, maybe it's not. But from a plot perspective, they sidelined Lucy on a cross for most of the episode. Mm-hmm. And that was a fantastic move. Lucy is fantastic. Purnell's fantastic. The character is super earnest. Although I feel like every episode she skins up her face in a way that says, like, this isn't right. And I think it's great. But by giving other characters space and that time to talk about that lore that you were just talking about, yeah, I think it gives the show more depth. So that was good. Tosin, what about you?
Honestly, I thought this episode was okay. Like, it wasn't the greatest to me. I think I liked
It wasn't
some
as
of
good
the
as last
previous
episode.
Yeah, because it felt to me like there was a good amount of just walking around and not actually like. The Ghoul goes to several different camps and doesn't really accomplish much in any of those. Like, I mean, you learn some of those players, but to what end, right? In the end, he's like, oh, I'm going to need some help. And in the end, he doesn't really use any of the help that he potentially could have had. I mean, he uses just the knowledge of some folks being alive, but he could have easily made that up in the past, so it just didn't feel like it just didn't feel like too much actually really happened to the at least to the extent compared to the previous episode. So it was fine. It was perfectly adequate, I think.
There's a lot more like surprise plot movement in the last episode, but I do think that his initial thought is he's going to need help.
Yeah.
And when he figures out a way around, when he realizes that help isn't going to come, he has to figure out a way around that. And the way that he did it felt like a nice twist to me. We can get into that a little later, but I think the Ghoul. What is it? The term that you like to use, Andy? Subverting expectations.
Right.
We expected the Ghoul to either, if it were super straightforward, there would have been a public army helping him out, but there wasn't. Last time we saw the Ghoul and Lucy was like doing some sniping stuff or whatever, and save the day. In this case, he has to save the day. But he can't do it by brute strength alone. He has limits to his power. And he's recovering from his leg and all that other stuff. So he kind of has to use his brain. And he kind of has to make a choice. Is he going to screw the New California Republic in order to get Lucy back? Because he apparently needs her for something. Or is he going to figure out a different way? And he figured out a different way that I think very few people expected. And that's my favorite. People are not expecting.
It feels to me like this episode
I
was
get what you're saying.
This episode felt to me like a response to last week's episode, where last week's episode had Lucy leaving the Ghoul lying on the floor, basically leaving him to die. And so the Ghoul in this week's episode, the Ghoul had a choice as to how he was going to respond to that. Is he going to leave her, dying on the cross, or is he going to rescue her? And the heart of that episode is the story that Charlie White Knife told about how sometimes in order to preserve your team, the crew that you are committed to be on this journey with, that you have to sacrifice other people.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think that is a very clear theme in this episode. It's like you got to wipe some people out to keep the people you want when you have conflict.
Yeah.
But the Ghoul could have wiped out the New California Republic. The other guys were exactly they were.
I assumed that's what it was going to happen, but he didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So did I. I was like, oh man, and then suddenly he didn't do that.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. Especially because he throws that line out like, sometimes when stuff dies, I sleep better at night just knowing that I wasn't meant to survive.
Right.
And you're like, oh, man.
Right.
But anyway, regardless of all the stuff with House is Divided or whatever,
yeah,
there's like an actual title here. Tosin, what is that title? And what does it mean?
Well, it's called The Profligate. And it is, we discussed this in last episode, for those who listened to the last episode, but it's really being extravagant, kind of wasteful. It seems to be a term that they call any sort of outsider or someone who's not part of their clan, cult system, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Totally. To me, looking throughout this episode, it just feels like it's a word for the other, and kind of a negative word to maybe describe humans or other people as kind of waste of space, as like they're just resources that are not in use for the service of their organization.
Yeah, they definitely treat everybody as the other. They don't seem to respect life at all. Now, granted, most people in this universe don't respect life, but those guys are on a whole different level.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was interesting in this episode that as part of the world building, you see that there are productive industries for these ghouls, that they're not just an outcast class. In season 1, I think we saw when the ghoul would come across other ghouls, they're like hiding in the corner of some building, or they're scrabbling to survive. They're not really part of a industrious, productive class. But Thaddeus, is a foreman, and the kids who are half ghouls, they're also working in this productive industry. And it just makes me wonder, like, Thaddeus mentioned that the kids should consider themselves lucky because the place that they're in is well defended, which leads me to ask the question, like, under whose protection are they? Who are they working with or for?
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing about this is it's not just ghouls working because of the folks in society. It's kind of like a ghoul-owned company, right? Like a ghoul-owned business.
Yeah, that is running it. That's equal opportunity, right?
Right, and maybe that's the only reason why it works. Maybe that's the only reason why they're able to be productive and not be kept just to the side, because I guess ultimately it's essentially they're discriminated against, right?
Yeah. So, like, you're saying maybe Thaddeus is an outlier in the ghoul community. Yeah,
perhaps, but it is kind of. Yeah, it is a little interesting though, because the folk that we know as the ghoul, everyone lets him like come and go. Like they're like, oh, it's you. I recognize you.
It's true. So, he doesn't really have a.
Yeah, so he's allowed like free roam.
The guys in the Nuka-Cola Remnant, they were like straight up saving vials for him. We were waiting for you to come. Here are a bunch of vials. Help us take the thing back, right? I will say that when it comes to the ghouls doing productive stuff, they are easily motivated, right? On some level, they're either going to eat someone's flesh, or they could live a more or less normalish life so long as they have access to the vials of the fluid they need. So if you're motivated by that, then, and especially if you're like young enough to be a kid who can't protect themselves, and someone's like, do this bottle cap thing, and I'll give you what you need to survive and not go crazy, turn into a zombie, then you can see them being like, sure, yeah. I mean, they should be on some level the most productive members in society because they're so easily, they're addicted to a substance. There are plenty of corporations that would like their workers to be addicted to something that they could pay them less and give them that thing, right?
Let's talk about more world building. In this episode, we have this legion who follows ancient Roman culture for some reason. I don't know. Maybe because it's so efficient. Or they perceive it to be so efficient and productive.
They seek order and chaos, which is what Rome was supposed to represent. It's also weird because calling people profligate when you're dressed like one of those centurions in the legion is ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face. They've got red clothing and random bits of armor. Lacerda Legate is wearing like a mask. A metal mask that looks like the sun.
Yeah.
And he's calling Lucy in her clean lines and her uniform profligate.
Yeah.
That doesn't track.
I think it's okay to be profligate if you're doing it in the name of military force.
Caesar.
Yeah.
But it's like Roman and football gear.
Right. But also, isn't the whole point of being a military person being the opposite of profligate, being Spartan? Right?
If you're a Spartan,
like the whole, like, all the armies. I mean, the when you think about like army ideals, the idea of Spartans still holds sway all today. So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, it is funny.
Paradox.
One other thing I found interesting was the pronunciation of Caesar or Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Dwayne, you have some thoughts on her pronunciation, but we know that their pronunciation is correct.
Andy did some research on that, right?
Yeah, so the English Caesar developed later as Latin evolved and borrowed words into Germanic languages. So Lucy is clearly wrong about the Roman pronunciation of Kaiser, but she's only going by what she was taught. But that, to me, that begs the question, if the Legion are Lucy's contemporaries, not time travelers, then who taught them the accurate way to pronounce Kaiser?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're the Legion and you're like, America's a failure, you know, that can start with the whole, you can't even pronounce Kaiser correctly.
It's such an interesting bit of world building. I love it, though.
Yeah, but it also shows that, like, Lucy still thinks she's like a know-it-all, and
totally.
still thinks she has all of the answers in a world that she's not really very familiar with.
Totally.
I mean, that's why she ends up being crucified, which actually is quite interesting when you think about it in terms of, with Jesus and his crucifixion and him coming out as though, he kind of, in some regards, sort of a know-it-all and sort of a threat, and therefore, put on the cross there. But it also brings the question, for Lucy, and even for this entire episode, for half of this episode, was it worth saving that girl to have her neck just sliced off? Like,
I was worried that we were gonna So I mean, the woman that the person that they kill, like they call the show calls the woman, she saves the woman at the expense of just like saving the ghoul and moving on. But I think the reason that they killed her off and they made her nothing is not just simply to sort of like confuse the viewer, but I think the whole thing was an exercise for both the ghoul and for Lucy. She's gonna deny the ghoul, the stim, give it to the woman, save the woman's life, while she's like, "Hey, you got to be nice to people." Then she gets her head cut off, and then Legate Lacerda's like, or Lacerda Legate's like, being good doesn't matter. It's all about your strength,
right?
It takes a lot of energy to make a person, and those kids what we saw earlier. It's like most kids are dead by now. You should be happy. So like,
right
in this world. Life is actually, human life at least, is pretty precious. Getting it to that point is pretty precious. And if you think in a weird, super paternalistic situation like the Legion, if we wanted to get really geeky about it, they'd probably want to keep as many women around as possible. They wanted to take, do the first night thing with Lucy, right? Because they're gross. But they were just like, you lost your Legion person, so we're going to cut your head off, yada, yada, yada. And I feel like then Lucy begins to see a little bit of what the ghoul was talking about when it comes to that, right? But at the same time, the ghoul is beginning to see a little bit of what Lucy was talking about, which is why he didn't sell out the NCR, which is why he did end up going back for her. Although he does have his own motives, because he says something along the lines of, we need her. So, but I think we were all a little shocked at all that effort she went through to only have like a woman's neck sliced open. And then there's a later scene where you see them fitting that woman's head onto a spike.
I think it was funny also that in negotiating the prima nocta stuff in front of her, that she was so shameless about the years of cousin stuff that she had on her resume. It's
right, totally taboo for us.
Yeah,
but when your family's been living in a vault for 250 years, there's gonna be some cousin hooking up.
Yep.
And that might explain, why they're like that.
Yeah, and she again, no shame about it. It's just a matter of fact part of her upbringing.
Yeah. She just absolutely no shame. I mean, I think everyone just looks the other way because you're stuck in a vault with how many people were in the vault? Like maybe 100.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When the ghoul gets to that battalion, that tiny little outpost, a New California Republic outpost with the 2 people in it. One of the members of that outpost mentioned that the NCR had a battalion in Shady Sands, which, coming to think about it, I realize in the last episode when we saw the flashback to Shady Sands and we see the police force walking around, that has to have been the NCR and not the Brotherhood, which I had previously mistaken it for the Brotherhood, but it seems clear now that that's the NCR.
Everyone's wearing red. It's confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were there. And the NCR, that remnant, it's incredible to think that those 2 or 3 people were there for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like time doesn't seem to matter in this place. You know?
Right. Right.
The Ghoul's 250. Hank just happened to show up again. He just got decanted in time enough to have Lucy, but he's like expecting that Robert House is also awake at the same time. It's just very interesting how it's like a small town. Everyone keeps on running into one another, but that makes sense geographically, but it's just over the course of 250 years.
Yeah.
It just, it's just time doesn't seem to matter, that kind of thing. So
however, this is the first time we've seen like a wild, like a wild animal from the past, like a basic wild animal, like a squirrel, like a,
yeah.
Like it didn't, on the surface it didn't look mutilated. I guess we also had ravens in this episode too, so
right, but we didn't have like giant evil ravens with 3 heads or something.
Yeah.
Abominations.
Yeah, like the scorpion was like, okay.
We saw Xander when he was patrolling the outpost with Maximus. He brought out a rocket hammer, which to me, I'm like, oh, this looks very reminiscent to me of the rocket hammer that I was introduced to from the manga Alita Battle Angel that the character Dr. Ito had. That was a very iconic weapon in that manga, and it's interesting to see something like that show up again here in Fallout, because I don't think you see rocket hammers too often.
No, you don't see them too often. I mean, they're definitely a thing in like anime and stuff. I like the fact that sort of like how a Jedi has to use a lightsaber, like a regular person using a lightsaber doesn't really work. You kind of need to be in giant powered armor in order to get this thing to work. And apparently the learning curve is not too difficult given what happens in the end of the episode.
Yeah.
But Now there is a super sledge, which is essentially a rocket hammer in Fallout 4.
Oh.
So it is an item that you can...
I wonder if they got that from...
In fact, it might actually be in all the other Fallouts, too.
You may have just not ever earned it.
Yeah,
I wonder if it was inspired, though, by the Battle Angel Alita one, because it feels like that had to have come first.
I think that did come from. Maybe. Well, actually.
When did Battle Angel Alita come? Well, was that based off of
the manga?
Yeah. Came
out, I want to say in 1990s. So, yeah, that's before Fallout. The original run of the manga was in 1990 to 1995.
Yeah.
Definitely before Fallout's first game.
Yeah.
So
they had to have got, because when you see a lightsaber, you in any other medium, you immediately think, oh, inspired by Star Wars.
Right. I mean, even Optimus Prime has one in the 80s, and you realize it's inspired by Star Wars just a few years earlier. So it's a thing. But yeah, I thought it was when you have powered armor, it's like, yes, you can hold a Gatling gun. Everyone seems to hold a Gatling gun.
Yeah.
Like, but what else could you do?
Rocket hammer's fun. I like the way the Ghoul walks into this civil war between the two Legion factions and ends up essentially basically pitting them against each other. Like I mean, they are already pitted against each other, but he figuratively and literally
he turns a cold war into a hot one.
Yeah, he figuratively and literally hit the fire point, hit the match point, and exploded tensions between the two of them, which to me is reminiscent of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, which also had a rogue, nameless character coming in the middle of a civil war and setting two sides against each other.
Yeah, I also like I remember you teaching me about Chekhov's gun, and I love the shot that just makes it Chekhov's dynamite.
Yeah.
Like they just linger on the dynamite for a good second and a half.
I didn't actually see him set anything up to set that dynamite off.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is the power of visual storytelling. They show you him looking down.
Yeah.
The camera cuts to the dynamite, so he notices the dynamite.
Yeah.
Then when he's up on top of the hill and looking back down at them, when you think he's sold out the NCR, they're all getting ready to go. The explosion happens, and what's incredible about that is the explosion happening just on that one side. So he didn't throw the barrels over and make it explode on the other side, right? It exploded in the camp he had been in, where he got Lucy out of. And that explosion then forced the camp on the other side to think something was happening and start shooting. Yeah. So he didn't even have to go into the other camp at all with the other Kaiser or Caesar. Maybe that's why they're fighting, because they pronounce it differently. He just had to explode it. And then suddenly, at the least, his risk was that they would have less dynamite. But, them fighting each other is the best possible thing, because it means that whatever remnant of the New Republic, the California New Republic is around, they have that much of a better chance of beating the Legion. Now the Legion is in a hot war against itself.
So I think
it's a stalemate they were in.
I think that's the thing that confused me the most in this sequence is that I assumed that in order to free Lucy, he gave up the location of the New California Republic outpost. He gave those two guys up. And maybe he did, but maybe igniting the dynamite was enough of a distraction to make them forget about going after the NCR and fighting each other.
Totally. I mean, here's the thing. He could lie about where the New California Republic is.
Yeah.
They would not know until too late.
It's true.
It was the promise of being able to wipe out an enemy.
Yeah.
That excited, these profligates, that excited the Legion guys. Because they're just bloodthirsty, literally, from their camp. They're sitting there just torturing people, all that stuff. They're bloodthirsty people. So I think when he sees that, he's like, oh man, these guys are fucked. So that's the thing. So it's unclear whether he really gave them up and then had a backup plan, with the dynamite, or he didn't give them up and took him out with the dynamite. But at the end of the day, they've got literally bigger fish to fry than going after the remnant of the New Republic. So, and even if that explosion didn't wipe them totally out, it wiped out enough of them so that the other faction could hop in there and maybe take them out. And that faction has no knowledge of where the New California Republic is. So, right.
Good point.
Yeah, just one thing that was quite obvious in this episode is that the compare and contrast between Cooper and Barb. So in the scene that has Cooper waiting out in the hallway, he's in dark clothing in a shadowed entryway, while we look at Barb, who's well lit, wearing a yellow dress inside a bright yellow room. And even throughout the extent of this scene, they continue to frame Cooper in dark colors, even as he enters the room. And he's always sort of shaded. And is this, they actually keep showing him in sort of a red color. And so when you look at, the yellow versus red is often, urgency or, danger, while yellow often is happiness, optimism, visibility. While
she's anything but.
Yeah, exactly. So it's as if she's on the surface trying to represent these items, but inside she knows the sort of deeper darkness. And while on the other hand, Cooper,
trying to be rosy. Hey, we might not have to go into those bunkers, right?
Right, but on the inside, he's the opposing colors that he's representing in this scene. So I just thought it was quite an interesting dynamic.
Also, to piggyback on what you're saying, we often see Barb in her sort of corporate attire, which is, it's outside clothes, so to speak. It's suit style stuff, corporate, more like formal or like or kind of morose dresses and so on. It's always feminine, but it's a bit more hard. When you look at her, the scene has her in a yellow kitchen, in a yellow dress, trying to get a child's stuffed animals into a box. And it's like she's representing domesticity in that moment, which is something we rarely ever see, right? She's not the housewife. She's the breadwinner. I mean, Cooper's a movie star and everything, but it seems pretty clear that her corporate job is doing a lot to help pay the bills, right? So it's not like she's this is her typical thing. So we're seeing them in a bit of a role reversal, because as an actor, Cooper has a more flexible situation, right? But she's there at home trying to stuff this stuff into that box, and it's a futile gesture, and she's totally broken up about it. But yeah, so super happy, but I mean, dressed super happily, but experiencing deep not unhappiness. It was great.
Let's talk about Robert House.
Yeah, so House was sitting there. He, I mean, I gotta say, the actor they chose for House, at first I thought it was just some, it was going to be some random shots in flashback, and like we wouldn't see them again. And then we see him again here, and he proves to be a kind of weirdo, right?
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of eccentric, multimillionaire, billionaire people.
Yeah.
This I think he kind of is pulling on some of that reality when it comes to like portraying this character.
Like Howard Hughes.
But what I thought was, there was a Howard Hughes vibe, maybe a little bit of a Musk vibe. Like there's just a sort of like eccentric, brilliant, power hungry person. One thing that I thought was interesting was when he said, everyone's trying to solve the same problem at the same time with a multiple of solutions. Messy. And that was about the idea that like, people are unhappy sort of. And to me, what was zany about that is when you learn about, he's a guy with a lot of money, and he wants more power through his company. And when you learn about like free markets in school, the idea that there's a lot of people trying to solve the same problem at the same time, at the entry level, the ideal capitalist space is actually a perfect market. There are a lot of people literally trying to solve the same problem with a lot of solutions. Then over time, you get a mature market, and that problem happens to be controlled by a few companies because some companies exited either doing to be outmaneuvered, so they folded, or via acquisition or consolidation. You see a lot in streaming. So like, Discovery buys Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is up for sale to Paramount and Netflix. Whereas we had like all these different streaming companies, now we're seeing a consolidation happening. It's becoming a mature market. But the last phase of the marketplace is the monopoly, where one winner takes all.
Right.
And the market's matured so much, it's thought that one entity can solve the problem now that people have been thinking about it for years and years and years. But then the focus, once that happens, once you have a monopoly, the focus becomes less on solving the problem and nation of capital now that someone's figured out how to solve the problem at scale. Which is why everyone always warns you about monopolies, even if it's your energy utility, right? You don't want monopolies. You want you want a market that has competition. So House seems to be motivated by the notion of accelerating the timeline from a sort of like perfect competition space to the monopoly space. And he wants to do that by wiping out everyone else. And this quote he has, calling a perfect competition market messy, is a hint that a kind of a foreshadowing that he does want to wipe everybody else. So that was interesting. Now, another interesting thing I thought was when we saw Xander talking to Maximus, he's like, we can't have these clerics thinking about stuff. They're crazy. Cooler heads have to prevail. Which is, to me, was especially hilarious because you don't think of, soldiers in armor armed as the cooler heads.
Right.
Ever. But at the same time, he's not wrong because there are a lot of old men that send young men to war. That's always been the way of war. Like if war never changes, that's definitely been something, right? The people running an army are typically way older than the people who are actually fighting the war. But yeah, I thought those were both interesting, especially because he's like, let's let cooler heads prevail. And then he wants to shoot a bunch of children, So it just gives you an idea of how manipulative he was.
For sure.
He was extremely manipulative, charismatic. Hey, man, I have a spare suit of armor. You seem to be the tough guy around here. Let's be tough together. Yeah. And I thought all that was interesting. But Tosin, speaking of Maximus and Xander, and all that stuff, what do you have to say about Maximus as the quote unquote sword?
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about it last week's episode where, Quintus, directly, I think in the previous episode, called Maximus his sword, and he's done that in the previous iteration. But in here, we really sort of recognize him just treating him as a tool, right? He does not value his opinions at all. He does not want to hear his opinions at all. And who knows, maybe if we're being nice, we could be, if we're being generous, we could be like, okay, well, he just had bad news. But I personally believe that that's just the way he sees Maximus as anyone who is the soldier for him. But I also, if I'm also trying to be generous to Maximus, there was a point where in one of my watches I was wondering, like, hey, well, is he actually just trying to find out if killing people is just what they do here, as he says? Like, is that really just the direction that they go? That if it makes sense to kill someone, to kill them because their cause is righteous. That's of course being generous, right? So I'm kind of curious there. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think on some level, Maximus is looking for how he can help. And he's been, he's called the sword, but by today's parlance, we might say that Maximus has been given a hammer, pardon the pun, given the episode, and he sees his contribution as, smacking a nail. So when he hears, Quintus talking about it, he's like, oh yeah, I can solve this problem, right? What do you think, Quintus? And Quintus is like, no thanks. And we're going to get into that during the big picture a little bit more later. But I do think that Maximus is genuinely trying to figure out where he fits in, especially vis-a-vis Quintus, right? Especially last episode where Quintus seemed to shrug him off and say, yeah, I mean, go for the duel. And then when he was like pretty much failing during the duel, Quintus was like, yeah, you're not doing so well. And then Maximus takes that dude out. If you're Maximus and you realize you took out this guy who was much taller and much stronger than you, and then you hear Quintus talking about how the righteous prevail, then, because the righteous is like the good cause, how it prevails, then you're like, oh, well, if we're the righteous and I took out that guy, then, maybe we're the righteous here. We should take out this guy. So you can see how Maximus's logic works, but you can also see how a guy like Quintus doesn't believe that that's the way forward. Also, and that also gives you a lot of insight into Quintus's character. And for all his, like, I love you, Maximus.
Yeah. Quintus is also being very two-faced and self-serving to whoever, depending on the situation. Like when he needs Maximus to serve him, he tells him essentially what he wants to hear. And when Maximus brings up a solution that is clearly maybe a little beyond the pale for the clerics, he has to Quintus has to push back and say, hey, I don't want to hear your opinion, because if we do it that way, if we do it your way, the way you're suggesting, and we lose, we're all going to get killed. So he's adjusting his viewpoint according to whatever serves him best at the time.
Also of interest to me, or I kind of found a little hilarious in this episode, was Xander, who just sounds like Team America World Police. Even during the fighting sequence with the malfunctioning Securitron, you hear the Star Spangled Banner playing. Like, it's just to me comical and enjoyable in a comical way.
A lot of charisma there, and a lot of satirical, hero-ish stuff going on. So it was good.
Yeah, and then finally, there are a couple of conversations and threads around following the rules / what the government says versus your moral thinking. And in the end of this episode, it seems that Maximus and Robert Maxon, who's the founder of the Brotherhood.
Yeah.
They chose to follow God, follow their moral ambitions versus following the government. And so I think
at least in Quintus's telling.
That's true. At least in Quintus is telling. So that push and pull, I think, is something we may end up observing in future episodes. Even actually the Ghoul, has been going through this sort of back and forth on kill one person, save them all. This is kind of like Heroes. Do you remember that show, Heroes?
Sure.
They have the cheerleader save the world.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Well, it's very Star Trek. The
needs of the many.
Maxim. Yes.
outweigh the needs of few or the one.
Exactly. So in Star Trek 3, is it Star Trek 3? It's
Star Trek 2. The end of Star Trek 2.
Yeah, and the end of the Wrath of Khan, Spock has to go and save everyone on the Enterprise by going into the warp chamber and doing something with this high radiation stuff in order to stop a warp breach or whatever. It's a lot of technobabble, but effectively he's in a chamber with a lot of radiation, but he's also super strong, so he can do it, but he ends up dying. And the reason he justifies it is because he's like, the needs of the many, everybody on the ship, outweigh the needs of the few or the one, him. And so he sacrifices himself for everybody else. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying there, Tosin.
Yeah, exactly. And I think all of them will have to choose if they follow their morals or follow whatever they've deemed are the rules of the land.
There was a lot of that in this episode.
Exactly. It's also weird because, Quintus is talking to Yosemite, and he's like, he chose to follow his God. And she's already explained that she's not into religion. And he didn't get the memo. Now, think about it. If he had said that Robert Maxim chose to protect his people, humanity, right? Because her whole things, all these guys, all these elders, they have their different factions. And their factions respond to different things. One of them, the one guy's like, they don't ever mess with me, so I don't ever want to mess with them. And then the other one's like, why people aren't religious anymore. It's really just about me feeding them. So if Quintus had been like, hey, we have to worry about our people and think about how I can give energy to everybody, to every single one of us, rather than just obey the government. I feel like that could have actually moved her a bit. But instead, he tried to drag her into his way of knowing with the God thing.
Right.
And she had already established that she wasn't into the God thing, which just shows that Quintus, for all his political maneuvering, is not as bright as he thinks he is. Just like Lucy.
All right, now it's time to take a look at the big picture, which is our examination of the broader themes of this episode as it relates to the season and the series as a whole. This episode, we saw a lot of fighting within factions, a lot of civil war, and it seems interesting that it seems to reinforce a theme in this show that war never changes, even within the same faction. We've seen in previous episodes evidence of the Valtes fighting each other, civil war, wiping each other out. Here we see the Legion fighting each other, and it just seems like even when the goal of the Valte management is to wipe out all the other factions so that there's only one a true faction existing, and that's the best way to eradicate war. We know that that's a fallacy, because even when you only have one faction, you're still going to have fighting within that one faction.
There's a limited time for consolidation before break. You can all rally against one external enemy or many external enemies, but once you come out the victor, then you end up with effectively a fractioning along the lines. There's a term for this when it comes to revolution specifically, but yeah, I think Days of Thermidor or whatever from the French Revolution, where they had taken out the old regime, and then you end up with the reign of terror because different people are trying to hold on to power now that the king is dead. And once that happens, there's a ton of infighting, and that seems to be,
Right.
with the lack of civilization, which is why Xander's like, civilization could fall if we fall, right? We're just going to stop the chaos. And, Maximus legitimately is like, can things really get worse? Like, look at what the hell we're dealing with here. Like, look at the world right now. And Xander's like, dude, you have no idea how much worse it could get. And so that, I feel like, ties right into this whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. Also, like, I can't remember who would. It was the Legion, right? Who said all that remains of America is the overwhelming evidence of its failure. Which,
yeah.
I think it's the show's way of saying that all nations crumble eventually. But it's super ironic because this is coming from a faction of people who have chosen to emulate a famous a culture that famously had a fallen empire.
Yeah. There's like a whole book where half of it is about the fall of the Roman Empire.
Right.
And the Roman Empire kind of fell for about 500 years, right?
Yeah.
From the sacking of Rome itself to the end of the Byzantine Empire, it kind of like, it was a very long decline. So it is an interesting thing. I think it's interesting though, because you see all that remains of America. I mean, all nations crumble. And it's interesting to me because I feel like we like to say that, but it's not totally true. Right?
Yes, but I will say that if we're talking about the fictional the fictional environment of this world, of this show, then it may be very true. All nations may have crumbled in this fictional future, post-apocalyptic future.
It's kind of American-centric, so America's certainly fallen.
Yeah.
But I look at some places like in the real world, like China's been here since like it hasn't. The government may have changed in some ways, but it's remained a consolidated nation for thousands of years, right? Egypt goes back farther than anything, and yes, at one point it was bigger, but it's still here. And then there's also the Indus Valley civilization,
Sure.
India, that's been around forever too. So it would be interesting to see, and obviously Fallout never really goes into this in the games because it's really about how America and its most toxic culture, like the most toxic aspects of American culture, deal with an apocalypse, right?
For sure.
That's like kind of what the game's about. So it doesn't really get into what's going on in other parts of the world. It's not like World War Z, the book, not the movie, where they kind of talk about how Israel was prepared because they exist in a world where any threat can be real, whereas the U.S. basically, in World War Z, the U.S. basically pulled the fallout into Colorado in order to build itself back. So, I do think that you're right. In the fictional world that we're looking at, nothing could stay together because you end up with these like factions based on people's self-interest. Talk about how our society has a weakness and that individualism, but we're not sure. I also thought it was interesting because you tie into that with the Congresswoman, right?
Yeah.
She says, I can't afford billboards. I don't think America... Well, she's like, well, I can't afford billboards. I don't think America can afford any more corporate influence in Washington, right? And I love that because the character is a throwaway character.
Uh-huh.
We might see that character again, but she was just there to deliver the line, which seems like one of the central messages of the story, that corporate influence has taken the country down a path that will lead to its destruction in the form of Robert House.
Right.
And she's like, I don't take corporate money. All the other politicians are bought. I'm not bought. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is that we can't afford any more. I can't afford billboards or whatever, which is why I'm at this random veterans affair things, because I want your vote. I want your support, but you're not going to see me on TV because I can't afford it. And my whole platform is that America can't afford the corporate stuff. So that ties into this whole idea of like, the U.S. in this world was bought by these corporations like Vault-Tec and the others, the Pip-Boy guys, whatever, in order to consolidate all their power, and eventually everybody ends up dead or living in a wasteland. So I thought that was interesting. And then one more thing that I saw was part of this big picture was, and I mentioned it earlier, the Ghoul mentions when he's laying down trying to get the flesh out of his body that's been poisoned by the venom of the scorpion, the ship of Theseus metaphor, right? He's talking about himself physically, he's removing this chunk of flesh, and clearly he doesn't have a nose anymore. His body is, regrown in many ways. And the ship of Theseus is that if you've got a ship and you replace a plank, then you still got the same ship. But what happens when you replace all the planks in the ship? Is it still the same ship? Right? And so he's sitting there taking this chunk out of his leg. But I think metaphorically, when you look at this episode, he's also thinking about, for the longest time, he was this Cooper Howard guy. He was this guy who, where's my team, even though he's injured. He was this guy who was very much about, he was a war hero, or he was in a unit with a war hero. All this stuff, like this like team-based stuff. And now he's in it for himself. And so he's kind of about, am I the same person I was? Because everything about me is different. Now, I know that not everybody agrees with that interpretation of him using those lines. So, Andy, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, no. I think you're absolutely correct in that the ship of Theseus paradox is that when you take something old out of a structure and replace it with something new, and eventually do that to the entirety of the structure, then what you have, while it still retains the aspect of the old, it is a completely new thing. But in this case, he is literally not replacing anything. He's taking a chunk of flesh out of his body and tossing it aside. And he even says, you take out one plank, boat's the same as it ever was. It's just got a hole in it, that's all. But you take out a lot of planks, and all of a sudden you got to ask yourself, what am I looking at? This ain't no boat. It's just a pile of wood. It's just a pile of wood. So it's not like it's a whole other boat. It is. I think
you're right. I think physically you're right. I think but the reason he brings it up is because he's not thinking about it in purely academic philosophical terms. I think he's thinking about it in a kind of folksy way.
Sure.
But I think you're right.
Sure.
That
I'll grant you
he's
that.
Not like, let me grab this piece of flesh from the dog and put it in my body. Right? It's not happening.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I do think there's a turnover there. Like, what's left of him at this point?
Right.
Like, what's left of Cooper Howard?
That's really the question that he's asking. Exactly.
Yeah. So, and that the same thing could be posited toward America. Tosin, you were going to tie that in?
Yeah. So what was unique about this episode is, I'll call him LL, but our friendly legate said all that remains of America is the overwhelming evidence of its failure. Right. And what we see throughout these episodes are different factions, different cults that have been broken up, similar to this ship of Theseus metaphor. Right. As the Ghoul puts it, hey, a boat that's not a boat. Right. You break America up into these different pieces, these different piles of wood, and you are led to believe is this still the U.S. that we think it was, or that it has that we believe should be the U.S. that Lucy believes should this be ideal, city on the hill, or have we transformed it into something else, into some sort of decrepit pieces that don't identify with what the ultimate desire and goal was. Mm-hmm. And even Robert House in the past kind of what he was kind of describing what the future would become, right? He said you back billions of bodies into a corner at the same time, everyone trying to solve the same problem at the same time with a multitude of solutions. Messy, right? And so I think that's really where we've become and where we've been. There is no one force that's unifying or holding control. Each group has their own sort of beliefs and morals, as well as rules. Even the Brotherhood, we notice in Quintus's boardroom. See that lovely statue of Caesar in the corner. So we've got at least 3 different people who want to be Caesar as a starting point. So yeah, everyone wants.
And to remind you, Caesar was a dictator.
Exactly.
Yeah. A self-described dictator.
Yep.
Yeah. And to some, he was a tyrant, which is why they stabbed him. So.
I just love the Brotherhood lore that we get in this episode. Also, like every opportunity that they have to flesh out the lore of in this world, I absolutely adore.
Because it helps you understand how they got there, right? Like it's one thing to have a post-apocalyptic setup. You watch The Walking Dead, you see it kind of happen. Another thing to be thrown feet first into the aftermath of the apocalypse 250 years later, and then getting that kind of like slow trickle of how they got there makes the story all the more compelling. So I totally agree with you.
So we got a little backstory about how Roger Maxson founded the Brotherhood after a rebellion at a research center in California. And I was wondering, if it was possibly the same facility that our Michael Emerson character from season 1, Siggy Wilzig, if that's the same facility that he escaped from, which was West.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible. And in these stories, it's not really the way to have like a random facility here and a random facility there.
Yeah.
The idea that like even if it's not the same building, even if Maxson and his Brotherhood destroyed that thing, whatever Siggy was escaping from is the successor, at least in spirit, to that depraved human experiment laboratory kind of thing. So that was an issue. Although it's like they found the filament, they figured out how to create the cold fusion filament, and
right.
And so it was kind of like, what were those experiments? They might have been deprived or like inhumane, but they had a goal. So that's an interesting thing.
We also got a little hint from Xander talking to Maximus in the cockpit of the vertibird, how close the Commonwealth is to falling, which is a little bit of information that I don't think we'd had before. We see the.
Did you believe him?
I don't know. I do. I mean, why would he admit to a weakness in the Commonwealth if it wasn't? I mean, wouldn't the common wisdom be to project strength even if you are at a weak point? Why would he admit a weakness to Maximus?
It was the con. So the whole time, Xander is trying to win Maximus over.
Yeah.
He walks in and Xander sees little old Maximus. I mean, he's not very little, but like Maximus standing over the body of a dead dude. He's like, you are an important person here, or you're at least consequential. And so when you realize that Maximus is not the most educated person, well-meaning, absolutely well-meaning, but he's susceptible to manipulation, and you're Xander, smooth Xander, you can go about it a couple ways. You can try to talk to Quintus, but Quintus is, for better or for worse, an intellectual and a believer and a zealot. So getting through to him is going to be difficult. But getting through to his sword, getting through to Maximus, with a little bit of vulnerability, hey man, we really need that filament. Like, are we going to have a rebellion and all this chaos? Or, are we going to be able to save? You could be part of saving the Commonwealth. You could be part of saving it, right?
Interesting.
And I feel like that was part of the con. Like, I got to bring this guy in. I got my spare suit. We're going to go kill some robots. We're going to go and then chat. And by the time I'm done with all this, he's going to be on my side and we're going to take over his chapter. And I'm going to get whatever I'm going to get from the Commonwealth for stopping this rebellion, right? I mean, Xander is an agent. Like, they called him the representative of the Commonwealth.
For sure.
He's an agent, right? And the fact that they sent him alone, no retinue, no posse, no guards, that's a dangerous man. He's the James Bond of the Commonwealth in that case. The guy who walks in and he's like, I'm a spy, I'm an agent, and I'm even gonna tell you my name. That's what Bond did. He'd be one of the enemies that I'm Bond, James Bond, right? He wasn't like Ethan Hunt kind of had he was wearing masks and shit.
Right.
James Bond's like, I'm fucking James Bond. We can do it, right?
Right.
I got a license to kill.
I actually thought he was being honest, but I see your perspective.
Yeah.
I could follow.
I see it as well.
He might have been. I'm not saying he was definitely lying. I'm just saying that he was so smooth, we can't tell. And that's one of the nice bits of ambiguity in the story. I know, yesterday, Andy was the story does give it to you straight. And I think you're right. When it compared to Westworld, it gives it to you straight. But I do think you get these characters, these special characters. Whereas Lucy and Maximus are among the most earnest characters we see on television today.
For sure.
The people around all subterfuge and ulterior motives and everything, right? Even Cooper Howard, the Ghoul when he was a person.
Yeah.
He's got a problem with the subterfuge, eavesdropping on his wife, killing a guy even though it means saving the world. He's so earnest he can't wrap his head around that stuff. His gigantic noggin, he can't drop it around that stuff. But when it comes to the future, it's Lucy and Maximus that are kind of they're not simpletons, but they're pure-minded people, and they have power. The Ghoul's we're gonna need her. We don't know why, but she has power, and Maximus clearly has power, and so people are trying to manipulate them, whether it's Quintus or the Ghoul or whatever, into using their power for these different ends, right? And so I feel like he could have been telling the truth, but he also could have been saying it to pull at the sympathy strings of Maximus, because Maximus is a character who wants to do the right thing, which is why Dane is so disappointed in him all the time.
Right.
When it comes to this earnestness, you've got Lucy, and she saved that woman who then Lacerda Legate cut the head off, and they have a pretty nice exchange, Macaulay Culkin and Purnell, when she's on the cross. First, there's the context. She's seen upwards of 15 movies, she said. And when you're behaving the way you are, you might think you're the hero, but you're probably the villain. And it's really funny because we're talking about America and American culture and stuff like that. And that's a huge part of this, latter Hollywood. The idea of you didn't know you were the villain, but you are the villain kind of character, right? This is a good example would be Anakin Skywalker. He didn't know he was the villain until he was the villain. Spoiler alert, sorry. Then you get the way that Lacerda Legate says, good is not a meaningful vector in history. So these guys, these Legion guys who know how to pronounce Kaiser correctly, these guys, they understand some aspect of history. And what we're seeing is them saying that good is not a meaningful vector. Good doesn't stick around. You have to have power, and then if you want, you can tell people, you're the victor because you had power, and then you can write the history. Sure, that's a story that we've all heard. And this feels a little bit in the real world. Elon Musk himself said that he thinks that empathy is holding, Western civilization back or society back. You compound that with the quote that Tosin mentioned earlier, that all that remains of America is an overwhelming evidence of its failure. And by that, he literally means how, corporate greed led to the world's destruction. It's a weird way of seeing our current world, having to worry about it, and seeing this world that's presented by Fallout and seeing how things went in that world. It feels like a pretty good allegory.
The Legion understands the difference between good and evil, and they are choosing force over good.
Yes, I agree with you. And when you think about the role that Greco-Roman thought has in shaping the ideals of Western society, our society, then you can see why. Even in the United States, the Senate was built on the Roman Senate. The thing about it was that instead of just having the Senate, you're supposed to have the House of Representatives to sort of hack away to having a better version of Rome, right? The Capitol is designed after we have all this neo-Roman buildings in Washington, D.C. So when Macaulay Culkin's character is talking about the fundamentals of his Roman way of thinking, his Roman way of life, it's not some random historical throwback. It's stuff that's tied to the way we live our lives in reality, because that Greco-Roman thought is a huge part of what we consider to be Western philosophy, Western thinking, Western thought, our society's way of being, our worldview. So the fact that it's all about strength, that really matters. It's so much about strength that, Kaiser was the Roman guy, but, up until the 20th century, the Russians had a version called the Tsar.
Right.
And then the Germans took that and they had the Kaiser for their empire. So it's like this thinking, this way of being is so powerful that people reinvented it or kept the term or reused the term to invoke their own power. So I think that was pretty interesting. But I want to get back to the last episode where she saved this woman's life only to have her beheaded. And then she herself is crucified, right? So for all that's going on here, it's like the Ghoul's worldview seems to be coming back to haunt her. But at the same time, the Ghoul he's changing his worldview to possibly not screw people when it comes to like the New California Republic remnant, and when it comes to saving Lucy. So that to me was pretty interesting. They're changing each other. They're having an effect on one another.
I keep waiting for Lucy to become more jaded and cynical. For the Ghoul's threat to her was, "You're me. You just don't know it yet. You just don't know it yet." Essentially, so I keep waiting for that to happen with Lucy.
I know, it's like that moment in Peter Jackson's version of the Lord of the Rings where it's time to throw the ring into the lava, and Bilbo is like, "No." Right. And you're like, "Oh no." You're waiting for that to be Lucy. She's about to save somebody and she's like, "Wait, let me just kill you." Meanwhile, Xander brings up this idea that clerics, the religious, have too much power in Maximus's chapter of the Brotherhood, right? And I feel like that was a pretty interesting thing. I already mentioned how if they were trying to, if Quintus had tried to sell the whole idea on, you want to save the most people possible, stick with me, that would have worked. But instead, you've got this guy saying, trust in God and the Almighty, and it's just not working, right? But it's also cool how Quintus is like you said, Andy, it's all about who he's talking to. So Quintus is basically talking to this other elder, and he's talking about, righteous war and how they'll win because they're righteous and all this stuff. And at the same time, he understands that he needs numbers to win a war. He needs an alliance. And Xander shows up and the alliance falls apart. And he's like, we cannot win this without the alliance because we need people. Like, yes, I'm talking about righteousness and everything, but I'm only talking about righteousness to get more people so we can actually win. For righteousness alone, it's cynical. The Quintus knows that righteousness alone isn't going to have them win. And that to me was so interesting. And then we have the legate telling Lucy that it's all about strength and it's not about the good thing to do. Righteousness is a form of goodness. So you've got Quintus talking about righteousness and Maximus internalizing righteousness as the main cause of the fight. Righteousness is a form of goodness. And Maximus being told that goodness won't win a war, at the same time where we're seeing Legate say that, dude, your goodness doesn't mean anything, only strength means stuff.
Right.
It's like the audience is getting pounded with this idea that it's all about strength. And I wonder, as the season goes on, if our characters don't pursue an agenda of gaining more strength so that they can do good, which would then fulfill this sort of like prophecy that all war is the same. Everyone is looking for peace through war, peace through strength.
Sure.
You've heard that so many times before.
Sure.
So, strength and honor, right?
Exactly. And you also see it. So like, Lucy wants her fellow humans to make a better world. Maximus wants the same thing through the Brotherhood. He's like, I'm at the Brotherhood, Dane, because it's the best way to make the world a better place. And then you have Charlie Whiteknife, who doesn't believe he was fighting. He believes he wants to fight. He wants to do the right thing. But he's on the other side of the battle. And he doesn't believe he was fighting on the correct side of the war that won, right? He's like, we fought the war and we won bad guys, which is exactly what Lucy was saying to the Legate. Like, you might be the bad guys. The difference is the Legate is out there being like, it's okay for the bad guys.
Right.
And that's
good, bad doesn't matter. Strength is all that matters. These value judgments about good or bad are irrelevant.
Yeah, being alive is what matters in the end.
Yeah.
Which is why you have ghouls. Ghouls know that they're dead, but they're like, I'm still here.
Yeah.
It's this whole thing is a mess, and I love it.
We've got some unanswered questions. I've got some unanswered questions. I don't know, maybe you guys do as well. So first question for me is, we see in the beginning of this episode, the capped soda is being harvested for the caps, which are a currency in this universe. So, but I want to know, where does all the bottled soda come from? Like, wouldn't it make more sense just to mint caps from the get-go?
Sense is not the point here. Andy. More importantly, how do you manufacture the caps? You need people to be alive to take the caps off. So they have to drink soda, Andy.
But where does the soda come from? Where is all this soda coming from?
The soda place. Maybe it's coming from Hank and the New Vegas bunker.
Other question I have is what is Robert House doing sizing up Cooper at the Veterans Service Award? Like, what's his game? How did he even know? Because it seemed like he was there deliberately to interrogate Cooper in the bathroom, but I didn't even think that they knew each other. How did Robert House know who Cooper was, or where to find him, or where to, what's his purpose? I think these are all questions that we're going to get answered in subsequent episodes, but I'm just asking about it.
I guess from my perspective, I actually am not quite clear that Cooper knows that that's Robert House.
Yeah, no, I don't think he does.
Yeah. So he just thinks he's a creepy guy in the bathroom.
Yeah.
He was a creepy guy in the bathroom. Like, as guys go in the bathroom.
Yeah.
That was incredibly creepy.
Yes. I mean, Cooper even points that out. He's like, this is not, you don't talk to veterans in the bathroom where they got their dicks in their hands.
It's inappropriate, man. Just felt like I can see the Big Lebowski being like, this is not okay. I've mentioned it a couple times. Like, why does the Ghoul say that he needs Lucy? I think, like what you just said, we'll figure this out as the season goes on. The civilization that Xander says is going to fall even more. Like, what is there? Is the Commonwealth in like really good shape somewhere? I'd love to see what they got going on, sending Xander like that, having extra suits, all that stuff. They seem to have more resources. And in the same vein, how is it possible that the NCR like remnant can totally believe that they're winning a war when they have like nothing? I mean, from what we understand, guys, have you seen any NCR people beside the ones like alive today, as opposed to the past? Have you seen any NCR people so far, aside from the ones that got killed at the end of last season?
No, other than that lone outpost in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, those are my questions.
So let's talk about the technical aspects here, which is behind the scenes elements we enjoyed in this episode: music, acting, visual effects. And I just want to say that the Legate character was portrayed by Macaulay Culkin, who I don't see in acting very often. I think he's taken a break from acting. I think he's done some voice work, but it's nice to see him in a role again. And I guess we're not going to see him, or maybe if his side survived this skirmish, this Civil War skirmish, we may see him in a future episode. But it's a little weird.
He might be Caesar now.
That's a good point.
I mean, do you bring on a big fish like Macaulay Culkin?
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
But then again, Kumail Nanjiani is a pretty big fish too.
It's true.
And
they
should have done.
He only got one episode in a small part of another episode.
Yeah.
But it does cost a lot of money for extras. So quicker you get them off screen, the better. Cheaper your budget is for the rest of the season.
Stunt casting, in other words. Right. So maybe Macaulay Culkin's presence here is just stunt casting, but it'd be nice to see him expand this role, become Kaiser. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess he didn't really bring anything to the table for me. Like, it was just...
How dare you?
I didn't think it was anything...
How dare you?
I didn't think it was anything spectacular or anything.
He was learning strength through combat at arms with, bad guys.
If you could see me now, Tosin, I've got two hands against either side of my face and I'm shouting at the top of my lungs.
I'm tying paint cans to my stairs right now in honor of Macaulay Culkin.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk about Ephemera, where we talk about links and extra textual connections that'll help you enhance your enjoyment of the episode. And this week we got a mail tube. 2 episodes ago, I mentioned being confused about the title card, The Man Who Knew, when introducing Justin Theroux's character, who we've all up till this point assumed is Robert House. Well, a listener, Jonathan Powell 002 on X, reminds me that The Man Who Knew was the Robert House character intro card, just like we got last season with Lucy, Maximus, the Ghoul, and we got this season with the Legion. We saw they get their own title card. The Man Who Knew is just another title card to introduce Robert House. However, I will bring up that up to this point, the Justin Theroux character has not been named by a proper name by anyone on this show. So it's
been inferred that he's Robert House, but we haven't gotten like someone saying, Robert, come over here.
Exactly. So we don't know that this character is in fact Robert House. So whenever I mention him in our show notes, I always put his name in quotes because I'm like, could be Robert House or it could be like a Westworld Man in Black / what was the Man in Black's William situation where we just have to refer to him as the Man in Black whenever we see him in the present day.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to bring up Battle Angel Alita and Yojimbo again, and I'll link to those in the show notes so that you have a reference for what we were talking about in this body of this episode. Dwayne, how about yourself? You have any ephemera?
First things first, when we meet Thaddeus in his sweatshop, there's a place called the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. There was a fire, a big tragedy, and we were about to see a big tragedy in that in the cap factory. In that tragedy, the kids were used as labor with no regard to their well-being. They were just a focus for profit for the people on top. And they said that war is always the same. It seems like capital America is the same, whether it's post-apocalyptic or not. They're using child labor to get these caps and ask for water. They're like a drink soda. So it just felt like a disaster waiting to happen, like the tragedy at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which was a big fire in New York at a factory that used child labor by today's standards. Now, I also thought that it was interesting from another ephemera point that Culkin's character was called Lacerda Legate. Lacerda means lizard in Latin, which is the language that the Romans spoke, but also he cuts a woman's neck open, sort of like it's his thing. And Lacerda sounds like lacerate. And lacerate is, it's an English word, right? It means to cut, right? You've got lacerations and so on, to tear to pieces. So like the words sound the same. And, you've got this man dressed as Caesar that they're calling Kaiser. So I feel like some things might have been lost in translation. Maybe he's supposed to be the lizard, or maybe he's supposed to be the guy who cuts people's heads off. It's unclear, right? So I thought that was interesting. Another thing, Xander brings up the idea that clerics, the religious, have too much power in Maximus's chapter of the Brotherhood. And I'm reminded of the hierarchy from legendary fantasy author Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, right? And in the Stormlight Archive, there's a historical theocratic government on the world of Roshar led by the Vorin Church's priests called Ardents. And they sought political dominance over spiritual dominance, right? So they were chasing out power despite their religion. That like religious authority, like Quintus's clerics running the Brotherhood chapter, controlled much of the universe. And they would claim divine visions. They would claim, things from ideas from the Almighty coming into their heads to maintain control. And it feels as if that's Quintus's role too here. So just if you haven't had a chance to check out the Stormlight Archive or Brandon Sanderson, I guarantee you it is a fantasy story that it breaks a lot of rules and it's pretty fantastic. Actually, Tosin recommended it to me years ago, and I've only just now read it. But this hierarchy is definitely the kind of theocracy that Quintus wants to go for. And basically, the Victor, the Securitron character that the Ghoul was talking to, he bears an eerie resemblance to the Gizmo Duck character in both versions of DuckTales, the one that you worked on, Andy, and the one from the 90s. Gizmo Duck and Victor the Securitron, I mean, you can't deny they look almost exactly the same. So that was interesting to me. And then this might have been a technical point, but toward the end of the episode, around 44 minutes and 45 seconds, I was hearing what I thought was Westworld music. What do you think about that, Andy?
Yeah, well, you have to take into account that the scores for both Westworld and Fallout are composed by Ramin Djawadi. So, I think he's definitely maybe cribbing some dark chord progressions that he used to represent like the Man in Black and the evil forces in Westworld. He's also using that to represent evil forces here in Fallout as well. So it's very possible. That is going to do it for all of us for this episode of Vault 33. I'm going to go around the table. I'll start with you, Dwayne, and ask, where can people find your work on the internet when you're not talking about Fallout on Prime?
Check me out on Instagram. Check me out on X. Dwayne D. What about you? Also, I'm on Blue Sky. Tosin, what about you?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky at Toast43221, so you can find me there. What about yourself, Andy?
I'm on Blue Sky, X, what is it, Threads? Is that the other one? I'm on all of those as Mr. Babyman. You can find me there. Our show, Fallout, our Twitter handle on X is Fallout Vault 33. Also on Blue Sky, we're on Blue Sky as well. And all the other major podcast distribution networks. Add us, tell your friends. And join us next time when we cover the 4th episode of Fallout Season 2, which is titled The Demon in the Snow. I don't know what that means, but I guess we'll find out. Until then, please tweet us, leave us a comment on iTunes, and we will see you next time.
All right, thanks, guys.
Why don't you crawl out through the fallout back to